VMware vSphere Trusted Authority. In short form, we call it as vTA. Okay, and here is the agenda. First, let's introduce the what is the main customer key challenge and what is the vSphere Trust Authority, and we should also aware of what is a trusted platform module, in short form TPM, and what are the prerequisites for vSphere Trust Authority, and how to establish trust in vSphere starting from 6.7.7 and the latest version 8.0, and how does VTA automates and enforces the rules, and what are the key benefits of VTA. Okay, so let's start with the first point, customer challenge. When we're having a conversations with our usual customers who are using the vSphere environment, we commonly hearing one common key challenge is establishing trust in hardware can be troublesome. That means most of the organizations they have a annual security audits. When they're performing a annual audits, they may end up with a here for our easy understanding. I took the 10 ESXi host hardware, but if you have hundreds of hardware, when the audit completes, the audit report says there are a mix of compliant hosts and non-compliant hosts. But it's definitely audit may show us some defects within our ESXi host. So that is the point they mention as establishing trust in hardware can be troublesome. We cannot maintain all hardware with a same kind of configuration with secure manner. That point, securing our infrastructure used to require a complicated series of actions to be performed on each host to maintain the consistent and balanced infrastructure. So to address this challenge, VMware they come up with a solution. That solution name called VMware vSphere Trusted Authority. So let's understand what is VMware vSphere Trusted Authority. So let's talk about the diagram first. Suppose if you see the diagram, normally in every ESXi host hardware, we have a you can run the ESXi software on any of the hardware like HP, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, or any of the third-party hardware vendors. Once you install the ESXi operating system, along with the ESXi host hardware, we also need to install the firmware. And these are the most common things during the foundation setup. Once the ESXi hardware running with the latest firmware, we are good to install the ESXi operating system. So ESXi operating system means it's come with a bootloader, and the main key component in our ESXi operating system is VM kernel. So this information, to secure this information, it's introduced the component called host TPM. TPM means trusted platform module. It is one of the microchip it's installed in our hardware. This chip will collect this, establish the information, and also it will interact with the micro bootloader and VM kernel. All the information it will capture and keep it in the host TPM, and it will also validate the host hardware and firmware. And similarly, not only in the hardware level, it will also validate in the kernel and bootloader layer. And in addition, it will also validate at the secure boot verifier, and it will also verify where the ESX operating system is running. Our key service are hostd, host agent service. For ESX host direct access, we are using a DCUI. On top of the ESX, we can run multiple virtual machines. But how this TPM work is, using the secure boot verifier, it will also validate how many vSphere installed bundles running on ESXi, and it will also same procedure, this secure boot verifier, not only on one single host, it will do it for a all ESXi host, so that finally we will get a compliance report and non-compliant report. That is how this process is completely automated, but only pre-requirement is our hardware must run with a one hardware microcontroller chip, that is called a trusted platform module. When we have this card only, we can able to do the verification starting from firmware, guest ESX operating system level, and also the secure boot verifier level, until the how many vSphere install bundle running on the ESXi. All these layers compliance verification can be done using this vSphere Trust Authority. Okay, this point, as per the VMware, this is the official definition. With vSphere 7.0 and later, we can take advantage of VMware vSphere Trust Authority VTA. It is a foundational technology that enhances workload security. So workload means whatever the applications running in our virtual machines. And it is establishes a great level of trust in our organization by associating an ESXi host hardware root of trust, that is called TPM, and the latest version is 2.0 trusted platform module with the workload itself. Okay, and this TPM not only in our hardware level, even we can attach the TPM virtual TPM vTPM to virtual machines also. Okay, that is the point we are no mentioned here. Okay, now let's understand what is TPM now. So TPM means a trusted platform module is used to improve the security of our system. And for our easy understanding, normally in our office laptops, we have it is used by services like BitLocker drive encryption. Our laptops come up with a BitLocker, but that is also securing our laptop data. Same way, this server TPM also will help us to secure our server hardware as well as ESXi OS and also the virtual machine guest operating systems, and others to securely create and store cryptographic keys and to confirm that operating system and firmware on our device are what's supposed to be and haven't been tampered with. Okay, tampered with means it's not like it's not been haven't been damaged with. Okay, and typically it is a separate chip. It looks like this separate chip on the motherboard through the TPM 2.0 standard allows manufacturers like Intel motherboard or AMD motherboard to build the TPM capability into their chipsets. Okay, so rather than requiring a separate chip. So this is the importance of TPM. Now let's talk about what are the pre-requirements or prerequisites for vSphere Trust Authority. There are three categories of requirements. First one is ESXi trusted host hardware requirement, and second category is component requirement, and third category is VM requirement. Normally, if you want to enable this all the options, let's quickly log into our lab system and I will show you these options one by one. Suppose what they mention in the key point is we must consider hardware and software requirements when configuring the VTA, vSphere Trust Authority. Hardware means just now I mentioned we must have a TPM hardware, TPM chip must be installed in our server hardware. Or else if you do not have the hardware VTA, hardware Trust Authority, we have to use software one. Okay, so suppose if I log into our lab system, log into our vCenter server. If you want to see this configuration information, select the vCenter server, right side, go to the configure tab. Under configure tab, there are your settings and security. Under security only we can see trust authority. They clearly mention that to configure VMware vSphere Trust Authority on the vCenter server, refer vSphere documentation. And vSphere Trust Authority is not configured on this vCenter server. The reason is in our ESXi host must have a TPM 2.0 device must be installed. If we do not have the device, it clearly says it's not configured. And even to verify this device are configured or not, select the vCenter server. In the right pane, go to the monitor tab. Under monitor tab, you can look for a security option. When we select the security option, we can see 3 ESXi hosts and attestation. Attestation status is not applicable, and last to verified not applicable, and also TPM version also not applicable. If we have a TPM, it can be attested. Attestation is nothing but it's a kind of verification process, or it is giving a authorization process. For example, even the authorization, another keyword is we can also call it as attestation. For example, if you have any of the original documents, if you have an organization or university certificates, if you want to validate by any of the government gazetted officers, they have to do attestation. like they will validate the originals, they will sign a attestation sign copy. Similarly, here also our TPM will help us to validate our ESXi host hardware, firmware, ESXi operating system, and also if we have any VIPs running on ESXi host, all the VIPs also validated, and finally it will do a attestation using vSphere Trust Authority. Okay, that is the importance of VTA. And one point here is TPM latest version 2.0, and the secure boot must be enabled. This secure boot we can enable in our ESXi host motherboard level. And firmware should be, we can use either secure boot or we can use EFI firmware. And component requirement, we must have vCenter 7.0 or later, the latest version is 8.0, and a dedicated vCenter server must for the VTA cluster. VTA cluster means vSphere Trust Authority cluster and ESXi host. Normally we can use one VTA cluster. Using that one VTA cluster, we can centrally manage all other remote data center vCenters and also the ESXi host. So that point only we highlighted here. A separated vCenter for a trusted cluster and ESXi trusted host. Okay, that means for production we have a separate vCenter, and even for the to maintain dedicated vCenter specifically for trusted VTA, vSphere Trusted Authority. This one vSphere Trusted Authority cluster will help us to manage all our remote vCenters. Suppose if your organization is small, within one vCenter you can maintain everything. If your organization is large organization, you may have multiple vCenters. So we no need to install vSphere Trust Authority on all vCenters. You can keep it on one vCenter. That vCenter you can use to centrally validate the all vCenters. Okay, and also it require a key server. Key server, another name is key management server. That is the component requirements. And virtual machine requirement, even our virtual machine must be configured with a EFI firmware. But how we can see the EFI firmware is, suppose let me log into our lab system. You can select any of the virtual machine, go to the edit settings, and virtual machine options tab. We can see our boot option. When I select the boot option, we can see the firmware. See here defaultly showing as EFI recommended. It's already configured. Firmware must be EFI while VBS is selected. Okay, we already selected the firmware is EFI. This only recommendation we highlighted here, VM requirements EFI firmware or secure boot enabled. Even secure boot option also we can find only here in our virtual machine edit settings only. Suppose if I select another virtual machine, go to the edit settings, VM options, and expand the boot option. Here in the drop down menu we can see, or else I will show you while creation of new virtual machine. Next, exactly at the last tab we can see. Within our customized hardware tab, we can see our boot option information. When I select the other, let me look for the VM options tab, not under hardware, VM options tab. When I expand the boot option, we can see the firmware. See, secure boot means it's a BIOS, or we can see EFI recommended. So default it's selected as a EFI recommended firmware, and secure boot enable means this option should be enabled state. Okay, these 2 points only I mentioned, EFI firmware recommended one and secure boot should be enabled state. This is the requirement to configure a vSphere Trust Authority. That means all our virtual machine must be configured with these two, and we require anyhow vCenter is required, and also we require one KMS server, and the TPM must be enabled. And finally, we must set cryptographic privileges and roles to use encryption. That means to configure all this vSphere Trust Authority, we must have a necessary administrator rights. Default administrator is vCenter administrator. Administrator at the rate vSphere.local ID is required. Okay. And another point is, what are the prerequisites vSphere Trust Authority? Just know whatever requirement we discussed. Here is the high level diagram. And let's say we have one vCenter server, it's running with the ESXi host and it is configured for trusted authority service, and we are using a key management server. This is one of our centralized server. Using this centralized server, not only one vCenter, in this diagram we see there are three green color lines. That means multiple vCenters we can manage using one trusted authority vCenter. And it is also configured with the TPM 2.0 attested. That means already hosts are validated and it's configured as a trusted host. And workload virtual machines also trusted host. So that this entire cluster, we call it as trusted cluster. It's not only limited to one cluster, multiple clusters, we can trust it using this one. But what is the benefit means all our virtual machines are protected. It have a encryption, and even if any of the attackers or hackers trying to access our environment, they are unable to access because our virtual infrastructure is completely protected. Okay. Now, another point is how to establish a trust in vSphere 6.7, 7, and 8.0. And one quick great start is within our vCenter. Let's say if we do not have a TPM hardware device in our hardware, even in our lab system, we do not have a TPM device. That scenario, VMware given one option is key provider. This key provider, we call it as vSphere native key provider. That key provider we can configure within our vCenter. This will help you to protect our ESXi host. So that point only I highlighted here. vCenter server handles attestation, and vCenter server handles the secrets, and vCenter server running in a VM inside the cluster. No repercussions. That means no impacts for failing attestation. Okay. But how we can prepare a key provider in our vCenter is log into our vCenter server. If you want to create that one, select the ESXi host in the right side, go to the configure tab. Under configure tab, security, you can look for a key providers. So currently in our lab, we have a one key provider that is in the active state. Even if you want to create another one, just click on add. We have a add native key provider, add standard key provider. Native key provider is the default vSphere native key provider. Standard key provider means it is a third party one. Okay. So now I'm selecting a add native key provider, and you can enter the name. Let's say native key provider NKP. We can say vSphere. So VS NKP hyphen. We already have one native key provider. I'm choosing the name as 02, and use the key provider only with the TPM protected host. TPM protected host meaning is our host running with the TPM microcontroller chip. If you have that chip, you can use this option. If you do not have in our hardware, just uncheck. Okay. So now add the key provider. So second key provider is added, but the status is showing as not backed up, but the type is native key provider. If it is not backed up, select this one. In the above, you can see the backup option. Click on backup and use the backup provider. And we have to download this file. So let's download. Once it is downloaded, this status will become as active. But this key, we have to keep it ready whenever any virtual machine is encrypted. If you want to decrypt, during that time, we need that key. Okay. And until unless our data is completely protected, only authorized people only can access. And now we prepare a vSphere native key provider. Okay, so hope you got this idea. The same point only I highlighted in this diagram. I created one vSphere native key provider within the vCenter. This will help to protect our ESXi host. Okay, now another point. Suppose, how does vTA automates and enforces the rules? For this scenario, instead of using vSphere native key provider, we have to use vSphere standard key provider. That means third-party tools. Third-party tools means one example is Gemalto key management server. We have a Gemalto key management servers that is considered as vSphere trust authority host running attestation services. This key provider will map to these servers. All this in this diagram I'm showing you three servers. Suppose if you want to configure standard server, let's log into our lab system. Same, select the vCenter, right side, go to configure tab, key providers, add, and choose add standard key provider. When I select the standard key provider, our KMS server, key management server, not only one, we can add multiple servers. So this example only in our diagram, it is pointed to three servers. Three is the minimum generally recommendation. If you have a three, there is a high availability and load balancing. Even if you have your infrastructure size is very big size, you can go for a more than three VTA host, vSphere Trust Authority host. Okay, during that time we have to configure key provider with this server's information, and it will help us to protect all our ESXi host. That point only I've written here. Attestation is prerequisites for access to secrets, and a KMS credential sealed to host state. Okay, that is sealed here, and trusted host managed keys and KMS connection. This trusted host only manages the all these keys. Okay, earlier our key provider keys managed by vCenter, but now it is managed by VTA host, and can encrypt vCenter also. This will help to encrypt not only our host, it will also encrypt vCenter server and gain the isolation. That means this infrastructure completely isolated between our production site, and this is completely isolated environment. And this VTA host not only protecting our one vCenter infrastructure, even it will help you to protect. We have other branches, those branch vCenter and host also can be protected using this VTA host. That means VTA means vSphere Trust Authority host. Okay, now, what is the final gain for us? So, what are the benefits of VTs based on the customer feedback? Earlier, we know that customers say all our hardware have a inconsistent firmware, and that is not up to the our audit standards. But when we are using VTA, this will be whenever we have a VTA non-compliance and compliant. We, based on that report, we can address using the VTA report, so that it will help you to user interface and UX improvements and better day-to cluster operations using the VTA, and improve the reporting and alerting. And reporting and alerting, even if you see from vCenter itself, we can see easily when I select the vCenter server, go to the monitor tab and security. Under security only we can see what are all attested, what is not attested. If it is not attested means we need to address that issue. Once all are attested means during the audit scenario, all our ESX will be completely go through our audit success. It will helpful to complete our audit, and also there will be no audit level issues. Okay, hope you got the idea on what are the benefits of VTA. That's it for today. Thank you. If you're watching this video first time, please do view, like, share, and subscribe to the Gnan Cloud Garage channel. If you're already subscribed, I appreciate all your support. Bye for now.